London in those days seemed to me a city divided between the commonplace bustle of daily life and Dage, quiet but ever intriguing world of Baker Street. It was in that snug sitting room at 221B that I, John Watson, had the privilege of observing the unparalleled brilliance of Sherlock Holmes, etching that bands and bands etching the bands. My own role, modest though it was, consisted of keeping faithful record of those strange cases which by fortune or misfortune fell into his hands. And among them, none remains so curiously etched in my memory as the affair of the Musgrave ritual. In truth, this episode took place before Holmes had achieved the renown he later commanded. At that time, he was yet a young man, still polishing the keen blade of his deductive method, though already it glittered with promise. The case itself had its roots in the traditions of one of England's oldest families, whose bloodlines stretched back to Norman times. Yet, to begin at the beginning, I must first describe the circumstances of how Holmes came to tell me the tale. It was a late autumn evening. The lamps glowed softly against the gathering fog outside, and the fire on our hearth lent a cheerful glow to the room. Holmes, his long form sprawled in his armchair, had been deep in his chemical experiments for most of the day, and I had been glancing idly through the newspapers. Holmes, you seem unusually preoccupied this evening. I should think you had reached some important conclusion with those test tubes.
Not so, Watson. The experiment is a trifling matter, merely an attempt to isolate an alkaloid. What occupies my mind is not chemistry, but memory. I was reflecting upon some of my early cases, those little problems which afforded me the opportunity to sharpen my method before it was generally known.
You speak as though your own fame were already a burden. Surely you must allow that these recollections are useful to me. Each of your methods I study and attempt to apply. If you would condescend to recount one of these early adventures, I should be grateful.
Very well, Watson. Since you ask, I shall tell you of the Musgrave ritual. The affair was not public, for my client was reluctant to let it reach the ears of strangers. Yet the matter was singular in its details, and I have always thought it worthy of record.
I leaned forward eagerly, for whenever Holmes consented to speak of his past triumphs, I knew I should be rewarded with a glimpse into the machinery of his extraordinary mind. He drew long on his pipe, sending a wreath of smoke into the room and began.
It was before you and I had the pleasure of sharing quarters, Watson. In those days, my practice had not yet assumed the proportions it later did. Yet, even then, I found myself consulted upon problems which baffled men of more established reputation. One such came to me from Reginald Musgrave, an old school acquaintance of mine.
Musgrave? I do not recall having heard the name.
He was of that class one meets at university, wealthy, courteous, and possessed of an air of antiquity. His family, the Musgraves of Hurlstone, are as old a stock as any in England. Reginald himself had little of the scholar about him, but he bore his inheritance with dignity. One day he appeared at my rooms, his brow clouded, and laid before me a case which proved most diverting.
Holmes paused a moment to relight his pipe, as though the smoke itself served to conjure the image of his client.
Musgrave entered with the hesitation of a man unused to seeking advice, yet his distress was genuine.
Holmes, I hardly know how to broach the matter, but a most extraordinary event has taken place at my house in Sussex. Both my servants have disappeared under circumstances which I cannot fathom.
My dear Musgrave, begin at the beginning. Tell me the facts plainly, and I shall endeavour to see what can be made of them.
It concerns an old family document, what we call the Musgrave ritual. For generations it has been preserved among our papers, a mere curiosity, or so I thought. It appears to have provoked mischief of the gravest kind.
A ritual, Holmes. What sort of ritual could stir such consequence?
Patience, Watson. You shall hear it in Musgrave's own words.
It is in the form of a catechism, questions and answers, repeated by each Musgrave heir. I myself was required to recite it before coming of age. Permit me to recall it. Oh, whose was it? His who is gone.
Who shall have it? He who will come. Where was the sun? Over the oak, over the oak. Where was the shadow under the elm? How was it stepped? North by 10, and by 10, east by 5, and by 5, south by 2, and by 2, west by 1, and by 1, and so under. What shall we give for it? All that is left. And where shall it be? Between Oak and Elm.
As Musgrave recited this curious text, Holmes smiled slightly, though his eyes glittered with keen interest.
A singular catechism indeed. And what connection has it with the disappearance of your servants?
That is the puzzle. My butler, Brunton, a man of intelligence, but of late a source of difficulty, was discovered studying this very document in my library. When I confronted him, he confessed to having read it and expressed some wild notion of its significance. I dismissed him, though not without regret, for he had served us many years. That very night he vanished. Days later, my maid, Rachel Howells, who had long shown affection for him, also disappeared.
And what steps did you take?
I searched the grounds thoroughly. We found evidence that Brunton had not left the estate, though no trace of him remained. Rachel was last seen near the river, half distraught. Beyond this, nothing. I confess, Holmes, matter seems beyond my understanding.
Holmes listened without interruption, his fingers steeped beneath his chin, his gaze fixed upon the ceiling as if tracing invisible patterns.
You did well to come to me, Musgrave. The ritual is evidently more than a curiosity. It is a set of instructions. Oh, it's night. The questions and answers, when properly interpreted, may lead us to a definite spot. From there, we may discover what mischief Brunton had in mind.
At this, Musgrave looked greatly relieved, though I could perceive a shade of anxiety still upon his features.
Then you will accompany me to Hurlstone. I should value your counsel beyond measure.
With pleasure. I am free at present. We shall depart tomorrow.
Holmes's recounting here was vivid, and I could well imagine the younger detective journeying to the Musgrave estate, his eyes already alive with conjecture. Did you not find it strange, Holmes, that the ritual, so cryptic in wording, should have been preserved without explanation for centuries?
On the contrary, Watson, such survivals are common among old families. A tradition is repeated long after its origin is forgotten. Yet beneath the obscurity, one often finds a practical purpose. In this case, I suspected a clue to something hidden, something Brunton had discerned.
Thus Holmes, with his customary modesty, passed lightly over the first steps of what already promised to be a fascinating inquiry. Yet I must not anticipate his tale. He resumed, his voice steady, as though the intervening years had not dulled a single detail.
Upon arrival at Hurlstone, I found the house exactly what one might expect of such antiquity, a grey, rambling building, surrounded by giant trees and overlooking a stretch of moorland. Musgrave welcomed me with cordiality, though his household bore signs of recent strain. The servants whispered together. The air was heavy with unease. My first step was to examine the library where Brunton had been discovered. A ritual lay in its place among other family papers, unchanged. From Musgrave's account, I deduced that Brunton had reasoned out some portion of its meaning and intended to act upon it. His disappearance, therefore, was not flight, but consequence.
Consequence, Holmes, you mean he stumbled upon something which overpowered him?
Precisely. But of what nature? That remained to be seen.
Holmes described how he next examined the grounds, searching particularly for the oak and the elm mentioned in the ritual. These trees, ancient and massive, stood at some distance from the house, their shadows stretching long across the lawn.
It was clear to me that the directions in the ritual referred to measurements from the shadow of the elm, at a particular hour of the day, most likely noon. With Musgrave's assistance, I began to take the prescribed steps, north, east, south, west, counting carefully as we went.
At this point in Holmes's narration, I confess I could not restrain my curiosity further. And what did you discover, Holmes? Surely such measurements must have led to some definite spot.
Patience, my dear fellow. You shall have the whole sequence in order. The result, I assure you, was worth the effort.
Holmes leaned back once more, his eyes half closed as though reliving the scene at Hurlstone, outside our own window. The London fog pressed against the glass, but within the sitting room the fire crackled, and I felt myself transported to that ancient Sussex estate, where mystery clung to the very air. And thus began the strange tale of the Musgrave ritual, in which a family's forgotten catechism, a servant's ambition, and a detective's reasoning were to converge upon a discovery hidden for centuries. Holmes had set the scene vividly. I pictured him standing beneath those ancient trees at Hurlstone, the towering oak and elm rising like sentinels of history. The ritual's strange words, half riddle, half map, were now to be put to practical test. I leaned forward in my chair, for I knew that in the unfolding of each step lay the very essence of Holmes's art, to see meaning where others perceived only tradition.
Musgrave and I began with the elm. At noon, when the sun stood highest, its shadow fell across the turf, long and distinct. The ritual had said, "Where was the sun? Over the oak. Where was the shadow? Under the elm." Thus it was clear that the elm was our starting point.
I confess, Holmes, that I never thought of interpreting it in so direct a manner. My family has repeated those words for centuries, without once attempting to act upon them.
That, Musgrave, is the nature of tradition. Men repeat what they do not understand until it becomes empty form. But for the mind willing to question, form becomes key.
He described how he produced a measuring tape, one of those practical implements Holmes seemed always, Curnis, to carry, and began to pace out the distances prescribed, not by 10 and by 10, east by 5 and by 5, south by 2 and by 2, west by 1 and by 1. No, Holmes, forgive me, but these directions sound more like a sailor's log than a gentleman's catechism.
Oh, indeed, Watson. But consider, each 10 and 10 is 20 paces, each 5 and 5, 10, and so forth. It is a set of precise measurements intended to lead to a point of ground. The words are archaic, but the sense is clear enough.
Thus they paced together, Holmes counting with exactitude, Musgrave following with wonder. At last they reached a small patch of grass, unremarkable save for being the terminus of the ritual steps.
Here, Holmes, surely there is nothing. The ground is level, the turf unbroken.
Appearances deceive, Musgrave. What is written in so deliberate a fashion must point to something tangible. Let us probe.
At Holmes's instruction, labourers were fetched with spades, and soon the turf was lifted. Beneath lay soil compacted with age, but after some digging, the ring of iron was heard.
By heaven, it is the Flagstone.
Just so. Let us raise it.
With effort, the stone was heaved aside, revealing a dark cavity beneath. A chill air rose from it, carrying with it a scent of damp earth and age-old secrecy.
A cellar, Holmes?
More likely, a forgotten chamber. Bring a lantern. We shall descend.
At this point in his narrative, Holmes paused, and I could not help but interject. You went down yourself, Holmes, into an unknown chamber with only a ritual to guide you?
Naturally, what detective would hesitate at the threshold of discovery? Musgrave followed, though with evident trepidation.
He continued.
The chamber was small, lined with rough stone. Dust lay thick upon the floor, save in one corner where it had been disturbed. There stood a wooden box, heavy and bound with rusted iron.
Ah, just! Holmes, what do you suppose?
Patience, Musgrave. Let us examine it first.
Kist was dragged into the light of the lantern. Its lid was swollen with damp, but at length it yielded to Holmes's efforts. So, inside, they beheld objects of great antiquity, a set of mouldering cloths, a few decayed fragments of wood, and lying atop them, a corroded circlet of metal.
This, after centuries of concealment, is this all?
All? My dear Musgrave, you behold the crown of King Charles, the first theft.
At these words, Musgrave staggered back in astonishment.
The royal crown? Impossible.
Not the state crown of England, but a personal diadem, long thought lost after the Civil War. Consider the age of your family, their loyalty to the Stuarts, and the wording of the ritual. Whose was it? His who is gone. Who shall have it? He who will come. Clearly, it referred to the hidden keeping of a royal relic awaiting a monarch's restoration.
Holmes's eyes gleamed as he recounted his deduction. Even in the telling, the logic carried the ring of inevitability, though I knew I should never have conceived of it unaided. Remarkable Holmes. Yet what of Brunton? Surely he too must have reached this conclusion.
Just so, it was his undoing. We found signs in the chamber that he had opened the chest. The disturbed dust, the marks of his boots. It was plain he had discovered the treasure. Yes, but he was not alone.
Stereo. Holmes's voice grew more grave. Meg, Kay.
Rachel Howells, the maid, must have learned of his secret. She adored him once, but he had wronged her, and her passion turned to vengeance. I surmise that when he attempted to remove the crown, she trapped him in the chamber, closing the stone above and leaving him to perish.
Good heavens, Holmes. A cruel fate indeed.
We confirmed it soon enough. Upon widening the search, we discovered his body there, lifeless, with the chest beside him. As for Rachel, she had fled in madness and was last seen wandering near the river.
Holmes's tone softened, as though in recognition of the human tragedy behind the cold facts.
Thus ended Brunton, undone by his own ambition. Home, the Musgrave ritual, kept for centuries as empty form, had yielded its secret only to bring ruin upon those who sought it selfishly.
He leaned back in his chair, the pipe smoke curling about his head like a wreath. For a long moment, I was silent, struck by the strange mingling of history and crime, tradition and deduction. And you, Holmes, did you not think it extraordinary to stand before a relic of kingship hidden beneath the very lawn of an English country house?
Extraordinary, perhaps, but not inexplicable. Every relic must lie somewhere, and the habits of secrecy among the loyalist gentry were well known. What struck me most was not the crown itself, but the precision with which the ritual had preserved the means of finding it. There, Watson, lies the true marvel, human memory made tangible across centuries.
I nodded, for his words carried truth. Houghton Wayman, where others would have seen mere curiosity, Holmes had discerned a coded map, and by following it had unveiled both treasure and tragedy. Yet tell me, what became of the crown?
It was placed in Musgrave's keeping, under the advisement of the authorities. Whether it rests now in private care or in some hidden vault, I cannot say. But of one thing I am certain, it will never again be sought by ritual alone.
The fire on our hearth had sunk low, and the fog pressed thick against the windows. Yet in my mind, I stood still beneath those Sussex trees, hearing the echo of forgotten words. Whose was it? 'Tis who is gone. Who shall have it? He who will come. Thus ended Holmes's account, though for me, the Musgrave ritual remained more than a tale of detection. It was a reminder of how the past clings to the present, of how ambition and passion may twist noble tradition into ruin, and above all, of the singular genius of my friend Sherlock Holmes. The tale of the Musgrave ritual might have ended with Holmes's solemn conclusion, yet for me it lingered long into the evening. When my companion falls silent after such a recital, it is seldom from fatigue. More often, it is because his thoughts have taken another course, spiraling into connections unseen by ordinary minds. Thus, I watched him now, seated in his chair, eyes half closed, yet every line of his face betraying the workings of that restless intellect. Holmes, you astonish me beyond words. What you call a simple exercise in deduction appears to me nothing short of wizardry. I cannot help but marvel at the steps by which you arrived at so profound a conclusion.
Watson, I have told you many times, there is nothing wizardly in my method. It is the most logical of processes: observation, comparison, inference. What appears miraculous is merely the result of seeing what others overlook.
Yet surely, Holmes, in this affair, it was not only observation. You connected scraps of tradition to a hidden chamber, and from that to the fate of two people. I should have been content merely to marvel at the ritual's quaintness.
And therein lies the difference between us. You are content, where I am listless. Let me show you, step by step, how simple it truly is.
At this, Holmes leaned forward, tapping the arm of his chair with the stem of his pipe, as though marking each point of instruction upon the air.
First, the ritual itself. The ritual itself. Ask yourself, Why should a family preserve such a catechism for centuries unless it serves some purpose? That is the initial question. The wording is odd, the directions precise. This suggests not prayer, but instruction.
Instruction, yes, I follow, but even so, one might never imagine it to be geographical.
Precisely why one must always test hypotheses. Consider, where was the sun? Over the oak. Where was the shadow? Under the elm. That language is spatial, not spiritual. Therefore, the next step is inevitable. Treat the ritual as a map.
I see. And the peculiar numbers 10 and 10, 5 and 5 you regarded as measurements.
What else could they be? Words may alter with centuries, but numbers endure. Add to this the reference to stepping, and you have a settled distances. Combine direction with distance, and you have a path. Elementary.
He smiled slightly at that word. Elementary, which upon his lips carried not arrogance but an insist, ends on reason.
Thus the ritual became a plan. When we followed it, we reached a point of ground. There lay a stone. Why a stone, unless something lay beneath it? From there, the conclusion unfolded itself.
Your reasoning is flawless when you state it so, and yet I confess, Holmes, had I been present, I should never have guessed the meaning.
Because, Watson, you would have thought first of what the words ought to mean, instead of what they could mean. That is the common failing. People read the world through the lens of expectation, and so they miss the plain facts before their eyes.
I could not deny the truth of this rebuke, gentle though it was. More than once had I seen Holmes pierce through a problem simply by refusing to be blinded by custom. Then, Holmes, may I ask, did the recovery of the crown not tempt you with any sense of triumph? To uncover a relic thought lost to history, surely that must have stirred even your equanimity.
Triumph, hardly. I felt satisfaction, yes, but mingled with regret, for with discovery came tragedy. Poor Brunton, clever though he was, perished by the very secret he sought. And Rachel, her love soured into vengeance. She too was lost. What is triumph when weighed against such fates?
As so, his voice carried a gravity I had seldom heard. Holmes, for all his cold logic, was not untouched by the human element. Beneath the steel of his reasoning lay a sympathy rarely revealed but unmistakably present. You speak of them with pity, Holmes. Do you then regard Brunton not as a criminal, but as a victim?
Both. His ambition was his crime. His entrapment was his punishment. He sought to profit from knowledge, not his own, and the result was death. Yet I cannot condemn him utterly. His intellect was keen, his curiosity admirable. Had he been guided by honesty, he might have been a scholar instead of a butler.
Holmes's words lingered in my mind. You know, Cotanere think it was unlike him to moralize, yet perhaps the memory of the Musgrave ritual stirred reflections even in him.
You see, Watson, the lesson is not in the crown, but in the method. The world is full of rituals, traditions, documents, customs preserved without meaning. The task of the reasoner is to ask, what purpose lies beneath? Strip away the veil of habit, and truth stands revealed.
Then you would say, Holmes, that every mystery, however ancient, may be solved by sufficient inquiry?
I should not go so far. Some mysteries perish with the generations that carried them. But where evidence remains, words, objects, shadows on the ground, the trained mind can often resurrect their meaning. The Musgrave ritual is but one example.
Trum has. For a time silence fell between us, not guard forest row, crackle of the fire, and the ticking of the clock filled the room, while Holmes sank again into his thoughts. At last he spoke with a sudden brightness.
Watson, fetch me that atlas upon the shelf.
The Atlas, certainly. I rose and handed him the heavy volume. He opened it swiftly, turning to a map of England.
See here, Sussex. Hurlstone lies near this bend of the river. Observe how the land slopes. Even without visiting, one might predict where an ancient family would choose to conceal an object of value, high ground, near trees of longevity, away from the gaze of servants, just as the ritual describes.
Then you maintain that geography itself may dictate secrecy?
Exactly. Landscape is the silent partner of every crime and every tradition. Study the land, and you may read the minds of those who dwelt upon it.
His finger traced lines across the map as though the soil of England itself were an open ledger, ready for his perusal. I begin to see Holmes, yet tell me, did Musgrave himself comprehend the full weight of your discovery?
In part, he was grateful, of course, and deeply affected by the fate of his servants. But as for the crown, I suspect he regarded it less as history and more as burden. Old families do not relish publicity, Watson. They prefer their relics to remain silent.
I reflected on this, for it seemed true. Word often hails discovery, yet those to whom it belongs may shrink from the light it brings. And the authorities, surely they press for explanation.
Naturally. Yet Musgrave's influence and discretion sufficed to keep the matter quiet. Officially, Brunton's disappearance was laid to personal misfortune. Rachel was listed among the lost. As for the crown, well, governments are adept at forgetting when it suits them.
Again, I felt the peculiar mingling of awe and melancholy which Holmes's stories often inspired. They revealed not only the ingenuity of crime and the power of deduction, but also the frailty of human destiny. Holmes, if I may, do you not feel at times that your discoveries alter history itself? Had you not uncovered the Musgrave crown, it might still lie buried. And now that it is known, however secretly, the course of memory is changed.
History, Watson, is nothing more than the record of discoveries. I merely hasten what would in time be revealed. Whether mankind chooses to learn from it, that is another matter.
His words, cool and dispassionate, rang in the quiet of the room. Yet I knew that beneath them lay the heart of a man who, more than any I had known, lived in perpetual search of truth. Truth, unadorned, uncompromised, inexorable. Thus, part 3 of the Musgrave ritual was impressed upon my mind, not merely as an account of a case, but as a lesson in Holmes's teaching. I glimpsed not only the machinery of deduction but also the weight of knowledge, its power to reveal and its power to destroy. Holmes's account of the Musgrave ritual had left me both awed and unsettled. As the evening deepened and the fire sank into embers, I found myself revisiting each stage of the case. The cryptic catechism, the shadow beneath the elm, the hidden chamber, and the grim fate of the butler Brunton, that a relic of royal consequence should lie beneath the Sussex turf, and that its discovery should bring ruin to 2 lives, seemed to me as strange and melancholy as any tale I had ever heard. Holmes, if I may confess, there is something in this story that troubles me. It is not the crown, nor even the deaths, but rather the sense that knowledge itself proved fatal. Had Brunton been less curious, he might still live.
True enough, Watson. Yet consider, what is curiosity but the hunger of the mind? Deny it, and man becomes little better than the beasts. The danger lies not in curiosity itself, but in the motives that accompany it. Brunton sought not truth, but profit. That is why his curiosity destroyed him.
Then you would argue that knowledge is like a blade. It may defend or it may kill, according to the hand that wields it.
An apt metaphor. And just as a blade must be tempered by discipline, so too must curiosity be guided by integrity.
His words struck me as more philosophical than was his custom, but I welcomed them. For though Holmes prided himself on cold reason, I knew there ran within him a current of moral reflection, however deeply buried. For a time, we sat in silence, the crackle of the coals filling the room. Outside, the sound of carriage wheels clattered faintly along Baker Street, muffled by fog. Holmes leaned back, his eyes half closed, but I could tell he was far from sleep. Holmes, you once told me that the Musgrave ritual was among your earliest cases. Did it shape you, do you think, as a detective?
Hmm. Undoubtedly. It was one of the first instances in which my method proved itself against both antiquity and tragedy. From it, I learned that deduction is not confined to thefts and murders of the present day. It may reach backward through centuries, reanimating the past.
And in reanimating the past, you altered the present.
Precisely. Every fact, once uncovered, changes the pattern of reality. That is why truth, however unwelcome, is always preferable to ignorance.
His voice grew firm upon that last point, and I thought of how often I had seen him wrest truth from unwilling hands, regardless of the consequences. Any of your staff did Pretty has Bellio, Co. Leo. To Holmes, truth was not a luxury, but a necessity, an element as vital as air. Yet I confess, my own mind strayed less to truth than to loyalty, for in reflecting on Brunton's treachery and Rachel's vengeance, I felt anew the weight of what bound Holmes and myself together. Loyalty had destroyed them, yet loyalty also bound me to Holmes, and him, I think, to me. Holmes, forgive me for saying so, Ting Daibut, but I cannot hear of the disloyalty of servants without reflecting on our own partnership. If I may speak plainly, you have never doubted me, have you?
With a faint smile, doubt you, Watson? Never! I may chide you for your romanticism, but your loyalty is beyond question. I rely upon it as surely as upon the revolver you carry in your...
You honor me, Holmes.
Not honor, Watson, truth. Without you, my work would often lack witness, perspective, or humanity. You supply what I cannot. In that sense, our partnership is as essential as any ritual, though one founded not on secrecy, but on trust.
I felt a warmth at these words, for Holmes was not a man to speak lightly of friendship. That he should grant me such acknowledgement was reward beyond any case or adventure. Ushin Stoble, perhaps sensing that our conversation had grown uncharacteristically sentimental, Holmes straightened in his chair and shifted the topic with briskness.
Now, Watson, let us turn our attention from dead kings and faithless servants to something more practical. You are eager to improve your own powers of deduction. Let us test them here and now.
Gladly, Holmes, though I fear I shall only display my inadequacy.
Very well. Observe, upon the corner of the mantelpiece lies your gloves. What do they tell you?
They tell me only that I placed them there upon entering the room.
Is that all? Consider them closely.
Rose and examined them. The gloves were indeed mine, of brown leather, somewhat worn at the fingertips. I turned them over, searching for meaning. I see that they are scuffed. That suggests I have worn them often.
True, but insufficient. What of the soil upon them?
Soil? I perceive only a faint dust.
Exactly. Dust of a reddish hue, consistent with the paving stones near the new construction on Oxford Street. Therefore you walked there today, though no patient of yours resides in that quarter. Why?
Quote, laughing, I cannot conceal anything from you, Holmes. You are correct. I walked there out of idle curiosity to see the progress of the new buildings.
And there, Watson, you see how deduction applies not only to the Musgrave ritual, but to the smallest matters of daily life. A glove speaks as plainly as a ritual, if one but listens.
I could not help but smile at the lesson. For me, such exercises were humbling, yet they revealed the breadth of Holmes's method, capable of ranging from royal relics to the dust upon a glove with equal precision. Holmes, do you never tire of deduction? Good. Or that were not at times weary you with its endless supply of problems?
On the contrary, the world would weary me without them. Problems are the pulse of existence, Watson. They are what keep the mind alive. To live without deduction would be to live half asleep.
His eyes gleamed with that restless fire I had come to know so well. It was the same fire that had carried him into the chamber beneath the elm, and the same that now animated his analysis of my gloves. Then I must resign myself to being perpetually astonished, for though I try to learn, I fear I shall never match your mastery.
Astonishment is the beginning of wisdom. Do not despise it, Watson. From astonishment grows observation, and from observation, understanding.
Again, I felt that I was not merely hearing the story, but receiving a lesson one couched in the peculiar idiom of Sherlock Holmes, where even astonishment was pressed into the service of reason. The hour grew late. Holmes, perceiving it, rose and placed fresh coal upon the fire. The flames leapt up, casting his tall, lean figure into sharp relief against the glow.
It grows late, my dear fellow. Let us defer further lessons until tomorrow. Yet I trust that in the Musgrave ritual you perceive not only the singularity of the case, but the universality of the method, whether one is dealing with the fate of kings or the dust of Oxford Street. The principle is the same. Observe, deduce, conclude.
Indeed, Holmes, I shall endeavour to remember. And so we retired, he to his pipe and I to my notebook, in which I resolved to record every detail of what I had heard. For though the world might never know of the Musgrave ritual, I was determined that one day it should form part of the chronicle of my friend's extraordinary career. Thus ended the fourth part of the Musgrave ritual in my memory, not with the grim discovery beneath tea. He elm, picked the gentler lessons of Baker Street, loyalty, trust, and the art of reading meaning in the smallest signs of life. The telling of the Musgrave ritual had occupied much of our evening. By the time Holmes's voice fell silent, the fire had burned low, and the lamps cast long shadows against the wallpaper of our Baker Street rooms. Yet, though my body longed for rest, my mind was alert, alive with the images Holmes had conjured. Ancient trees, cryptic words, a hidden chamber, and a crown that had waited centuries in darkness for discovery. It was not the first time I had heard one of Holmes's early cases, but it struck me with peculiar force. Perhaps it was the mingling of history and tragedy, or perhaps it was the lesson Holmes had pressed upon me that the smallest signs, properly read, may illuminate even the grandest mysteries. Holmes, may I ask, why did you choose to recount this case tonight? Of all nights, was it merely chance, or did the Musgrave ritual hold some fresh significance for you?
Smiling faintly, chance perhaps, though my mind seldom wanders without direction. I had been reviewing the progression of my method, Watson. Each case is like a stepping stone across the river of my career. The Musgrave ritual was among the earliest of those stones. Without it, perhaps I should not have crossed so far.
Then it shaped you as much as you solved it.
Precisely. The world teaches us through problems, and we are molded by the solutions we wrest from it.
His words were spoken with such quiet certainty that I felt anew the weight of what he had shared. For Holmes, the Musgrave ritual was not merely a solved puzzle, but a cornerstone in the edifice of his life's work. Holmes, do you ever regret that so many of your triumphs remain hidden from the public eye? This matter of the crown, for example. It might have brought you honor and recognition.
Recognition is fleeting, Watson. Truth is enduring. I would rather hold the satisfaction of accuracy than the applause of the crowd. The Musgrave crown lies now in secrecy, yet its riddle is solved. That is enough.
I could not help but smile at his disdain for reputation, though I knew it masked a pride of a different kind, the pride of mastery, of seeing clearly where others groped in the dark. And yet, Holmes, without recognition, how shall the world learn from you?
That, my dear Watson, is your department. You wield the pen. You chronicle the cases. Through you, the world glimpses my method. Were it left to me, they would lie forgotten in dusty files.
His glance carried both jest and sincerity. I felt at once humbled and honored, for though I often despaired of doing justice to his brilliance, I knew that without my records, his deeds might indeed pass unremarked. At that moment, the fire gave a sharp crack, and a lob fell into embers. The sound recalled to me the chamber beneath the elm, where Brunton's life had ended with equal suddenness. Holmes, forgive me if I return to a somber point. Do you think Rachel Howells meant fully to kill Brunton, or was it a crime of passion done in sudden rage?
From all I observed, it was passion inflamed by long brooding. Rachel had loved him deeply. He betrayed her with callousness. Such wounds fester. When she saw him grasping at a treasure, not his own, her fury overcame reason. She closed the stone upon him, and with that act sealed both his fate and hers.
A dreadful symmetry, love, turned to vengeance, ambition to ruin.
Human passions, Watson, are the most powerful forces in the world. They may conceal secrets more effectively than any vault, and they may burst forth with violence more destructive than any weapon. That is why in every case I look first to motive. Facts may tell me how, but motive tells me why.
He spoke with conviction, and I recalled many occasions when his deductions began not with footprints or fingerprints, but with the careful weighing of human desires. And yet you, Holmes, seem immune to such passions. Is that your secret?
Immune, not at all, but I have trained myself to place reason above them, and where others allow emotion to obscure observation, I set it aside. It is not that I feel less, Watson, but that I choose to act more.
His words, spoken without boast, revealed much, doubly, for if Holmes possessed a heart of iron, it was one forged in discipline, not in absence. He was not unfeeling, but he chose to master feeling. I took up my notebook and began to jot down the skeleton of his tale, lest any detail escape me. Holmes observed me with amusement.
You see, Watson, even now the ritual is being preserved again, no longer in catechism, but in narrative. Who knows? Perhaps centuries hence, some descendant of yours will pore over your pages as Brunton pored over the ritual.
Heaven forbid they meet the same fate.
Let us hope they inherit your loyalty rather than Brunton's ambition.
Again he had touched upon loyalty, and again I felt the quiet bond that lay beneath his words. The night had grown late indeed, and I sensed our conversation drawing to a close. Yet before we parted, I ventured one final question. Holmes, what, in your judgment, is the chief lesson of the Musgrave ritual?
After a pause, that truth, however long concealed, will one day be found. That knowledge, misused, brings ruin, and that deduction, properly applied, is the lantern that guides us through both the mysteries of the past and the dangers of the present.
Spoke quietly, but with a weight that stilled even the ticking of the clock. Then I shall remember it, Holmes, and set it down faithfully, that others may learn as I have learned.
Do so, Watson. The world may not thank you, but it will be richer for the truth you preserve.
With that, Holmes rose, laid aside his pipe, and drew the curtains against the fog outside. The lamplight fell across his angular features, sharp with intellect, yet softened by weariness. I closed my notebook, knowing that another chapter in the annals of Sherlock Holmes had been entrusted to my care. As I extinguished the lamp and followed him to our rooms, the words of the Musgrave ritual echoed once more in my mind. Whose was it? His who is gone. Who shall have it? He who will come. Strange words, born of loyalty and secrecy, which had slept 2 centuries to awaken in the hand of a detective. Strange words which had brought death to some, but enlightenment to others. Strange words which now, thanks to Holmes's telling, would not fade again into obscurity. And thus the case of the Musgrave ritual passed from memory into record, from the secrecy of Sussex lie, and to the chronicles of Baker Street, where it shall remain, not merely as a tale of hidden crowns and ruined servants, but as a testament to the brilliance, the discipline, and, yes, the humanity of Sherlock Holmes.